The part 3, enhance original innovation ability. It focused on the basic research. The part 4, expand the space for innovation and development. It pay more attention to the regional development of the regional innovation development. Part 5, promote mass entrepreneurship and innovation. Part 6, comprehensive deepens the reform and the scientific and technology systems. And part 7, strengthens the construction of science popularization and innovation culture. The last one is the strengthen planning and implementation guarantee. This is the more detailed information about part 2, build the national first move advantage of the 13th science and technology plannings. We can find in the chapter 5 to 6 to 7, there is some detailed technology field, such as modern agricultural technologies, information technologies, manufacturing technology, new materials technologies, energy technologies, and so on. So as we know, the plan mainly put forward some the principal requirements, which technology which will be deployed in which year, and what kind of goals, what are the specific tasks, it is not clear. So I think a good plan is to determine the priorities, development strategies, and the arrangement of priorities based on the national goal and the values and other complex elements in decision makings. So a complete plan for science technology states clearly the relation among the targets and resource allocation, with explicit evaluation stands the target for fulfillment and the impact of the implementation. So I think the science technology plan must be based on a scientific analysis of the current situation and the efficient judgment of the medium and long terms, the future. Therefore, technology foresight must be carried out to before the direction of science technology development and the main subject are determined, which is, I think, the term foresight is a basic work for the preparation of science technology plans. This is a figures about the relationship between the foresight and science technology planning. The top-down with stress the guiding roles of government in selection, concentration on the country's future development needs, while the down-up we emphasize needs So so
And it is a pleasure to be here participating in this kind of studies, and we had the so in Latin America, at least, and then we had one, and then well of contributing formulate public policies, and those studies have been very interesting because we had in childhood hospitals in the state of Pernambuco. We had some as well in the state universities for the state of Pernambuco as well. So, I mean, I can mention a long list of what we have done, but I just wanted to get your attention to the way we started. Where it was a huge list. I'm just talking out of my head here of the ones that I remember the most, because during the last 8 years I have been a director of CGE from 2006 to 2014. So this is something that teaching, I think it would be interesting to comment a little bit about the issues that we have had lately. And we have to retell that, because we had some of two new directors now, and we have Anderson Gomes from the University of Pernambuco and Caetano Pena, who is supposed to be here. He was supposed to be here actually, but he went back to Brazil. He was in the Netherlands, and now he with resuming the whole work of forecasting the future and foresight, and this has been done from the moment when we started to observe that we try and work using all of the capacity that we have in the country and abroad. So using many specialists here as well, many foreign specialists for strategic assessment and also the studies regarding the future. So in the case of today, I think I should mention a trend that we have been seeing here that is important to realize, that we shouldn't just study casually about it. We should advance to way of work which should be done through observatories. So we had some topics which would be permanent, and we should follow along and gather knowledge and competences in a way that we could use them whenever we would find necessary. So we have now 5 observatories, and I'll mention one of them, which is the being built for digital transformation, and we have one for sustainable cities. So we have groups that for the demands that we have been seeing as of late is that our Observatory for Science and Technology has started to look at the panorama and overview of science and technology in Brazil and the world. And I'm going to talk about some of the indicators as well. I won't take a risk here because but I count on your goodwill to understand. So I'm going to mention a type of result that the Observatory for Science, Technology and Innovation has looking at, and Liliana Badaró is the one coordinating it, and we have Marcelo Paiva, Denise Terra. We have small groups, and we use a lot of consultanship. That is a bit of the structure. We have a small group, and we have almost the great advantage of that is the fact that we can look for competence in any university or institute in Brazil, so we could always be blue people. Where research and development is being done, and that shows on the website. To our advantage, and we had to create a special. Let's go through the next slide, please.
Mas é o do meio que está fazendo isso. Meio aqui. Ah, aí já não sou eu, hein? De novo, são os problemas do.
I'm able to do that myself. Well, you can do that if you want. I don't know. Show you a bit of this diagram because program and using keywords, we create this kind of this map, right? We had used this in the University of Granada. At a have the driving topics, right? They are really strong. And when you go to the left side, you have very dense topics, left upper side. So we have more density, but left. Basic topics. And then the most interesting quadrant from the point of view of what I mean in terms of foresight would be the lower left-hand side. So these topics would be the low density, apologize, not this has been happening and it was now being dismissed, and or if it's the contrary, like it's just coming about as of now. So I think it is interesting to have that in mind. So what we decided to do is to adopt that to the cooperation Brazil-China, so from 2019 to 2022. So this is a contribution that I decided to bring to this event here today. So we have here word game, the keywords about the cooperation from 19 to 2022 between Brazil and China. So here we have the cooperations that are involving other countries as well. So we can see, well, Brazil and China, we have a greater number there, of course, around almost, well, about 1,800, almost 2,000. And then we have the highest numbers of contributions after Brazil and China would be the United States, and then England, Germany, Italy, Canada. In each quadrant, you can see which are the topics or keywords that would be making sense to the Brazil-China cooperation, at least for that period, right? So cornea, biomechanics, intraocular pressure. So this is very much a niche thing for ophthalmologists. This is, here we have transversal topics. So COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, remote monitoring, pandemic, coronavirus, and public health. And then emerging topics, ionosphere, meta-analysis, rehab, BRICS, recovery. Then we have a huge list here of actually, we won't read all of them, but you can see that you start having topics that might become interesting to this cooperation. And then the next one. Well, here we can see this is a timeline, and those dots you will see under there, you see 2019 and 2021, 2021, 22. So the dots will be the topics for each one of the periods. So if you analyze that, and of course you have a lot of information there in this board, just to show you that if you want to follow any one of those topics, you can follow that on a timeline, whether it's still effective or if it is showing up or not. And it becomes a tool that you can use to follow a topic. So this is completely free to use, you know, it's public. People can learn how to use those diagrams, and they can produce their own diagrams as well. Let's see the next one. So I decided to use here the opportunities for partnership. Well, it would be interesting to have a topic at hand and say, well, in this topic, what would be the possible interactions that we could have between Brazil and China? So, for instance, Internet of Things. So here we have the production of the scientific network that took the 1,500 articles, that was the most recent 1,500 articles from China and Brazil, and then we used those as a reference. And then you can see the first word cloud there, showing the topic, the greater topic within IoT. What are the most used terms there? So on the other side, you will have those topics according to colors, and then you can go in and check who's the author of this article, or who is mentioning this keyword here, or where is this university. And when you go to the personal page, you can get their own curriculum there. So you can go to their curriculum and see to what extent their interaction would be relevant or not. So you have a network there with 1,000 scientific productions there from 2022 and 23, so you can take a snapshot of that. And the next one, we have this part of the detection of opportunity in ships. And as a topic here, we have the protection of privacy and the edge computing. So this, you can see here, the green dots will be Brazilian productions and the red dots will be Chinese productions. So you can identify where that circle is. That set is a specific subject, and that is the greater concentration of interest for one country and the other. So you can create this type of analysis here. So just as a curiosity here, I will show you what would be the case if we could suggest partner institutions, right? So let's see the next one. For this topic, you would have on the left side the list of universities from China, and on the right-hand side you will have they actually inserted other universities there that are not Brazilian. So you have United Kingdom, you have Portugal, but you also have a list of Brazilian universities where you can find a match according to the interest that you have at hand. So I'm just risking say a few wrong things here, and you can correct me. But as you know, these are not certainties. They are just clues and things that you can follow, but they will help you find the interesting information. So when we talk about the privacy policies and public ethics, you have the Federal University ABC in São Paulo, and you have the Nanjing University as well, that they could be a match. Then you have the Juiz de Fora University, and then the Pernambuco Federal University. Those could be matches, right? So the idea was to simply show that I think these tools can help the cooperation, since the objective of this meeting here is to exactly strengthen the cooperation with China, and that was mentioned yesterday as well. So this is a very timely event here. I had the opportunity in my area, I deal with engineering. In the late 90s, I had a close interaction with the people in Shenyang. So we had the postdocs there, and they had students sent to Brazil, and they would spend time with me. So China was changing, and that was impressive to see. I've been there in '96, so when I thought Beijing was completely different, and I tried to take a bus from the first time I was there. First of all, I was an extraterrestrial. I was an alien there. City, and I was there looking and taking pictures, and when I turned around, there was a group of Chinese looking at me and waiting for me, and I started leaving there, and they and I forgot to take a picture of the group. So I have the case here, I have the anecdote, but I don't have the picture. It was an interesting experience. Sometimes the buses wouldn't have a bench or a seat, so it was a very different situation from what it is today. So it was very impressive to see the speed with which they have developed. And sometimes it's actually uncomfortable to see that we have the same problems that they had, and sometimes it's not a problem of diagnosing the problem, it's a problem of Thank you, Fernando, and also thanks to the CGE, who is in fact an oasis for interlocution and a dialogue between the National System for Science and Technology and Innovation. And I would like to highlight the invitation to use that tool from CGE, because that tool is, of course, open and it is completely free to use, and I think that is very important to mention. So we have a good news now. We just recovered the connection with our Chinese colleague here, so let's resume his presentation now. And I just want to link the last part of Fernando's presentation with what we have seen from the presentation before. So in one of his slides, he showed the 13 Foresight study, and the last line there was the assurance of implementation. So I think that is the point that Professor Rizzo is bringing us with some concern, and I actually share that concern. We have a lot of diagnoses and we are very creative, but we don't really implement the solution, and we have a lot to learn from the Chinese.
Dr. Yuan, thank you for being persistent and coming back to us. We are your second part of your presentation.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me? Sorry for the technical problems, and I think I missed some excellent speech. And I will continue my speech after these slides. Yes. Okay. These slides shows us some of the detailed history about Foresight activities launched by the most Ministry of Science and Technology for Development. Yeah, I introduce the character and the process of the Foresight activities in China. I think in China there's a famous character about the stronger organizing structure of the national techno foresight activities. We will divide into 3 groups, and the lead group, high-level leaders from the most Ministry of Education, Science, China Academy of Science, China Academy of Engineering, and other department. His responsibility is to identify the foresight fields and approve to build overall research group and the field research group and others. And the overall research group, we will invite some leaders from the Department of Planning and Custody, and about 50 experts from the universities, research institutes, and enterprise. And the third group is the field research group. We will invite maybe 40 to 50 experts from the relevant department of the Ministry of Science and Technologies and universities and other institutes. The responsibility of the field research group is to divide the subfield and organize and conduct the field technology foresight service and select critical technology fields. This is a structure of the organized structure of the technical foresight activities in China. The leadership group and the overall research group and the field research group. There are also some of the consultancy expert group. Some of the high-level experts are from the government, universities, industries, and research society associations. We also have some others groups about supporting research group for the methodologies. He will help us to make a platform, research the survey platforms in the online the service questionnaire. And the other research group is for the demand analysis and economic forecastings. There are 3 combinations. First one is expert participation and the multi-corporations. We not only invite experts, but also to invite some stakeholders from the other institute, even the publickers. And we also focus on not only focused on the technology fields, and we will pay more attention to the advanced interdisciplinary, for example, the non-consensus technologies and the disruptive technologies and others. Also, there's another unique character is the relationship between the foresight and planning. As strengthen the peer exchanges, we will invite some famous scholars from worldwide. For example, the Professor Alexander from High School of Economics in Russia, and Professor Wang from the Netherlands, and Professor Kuniko Urasama from the Japan, the NISTEP, and some scholars from the think tank, for example, the Elsewhere executors, think tank executors, give us more actually but
So these as Petrobras. BNDES is a tool. It's a bank, a development bank, so it's different from a situation that you're a group of technological. Counting here. Is it? I'm going to change the slide. So I could divide the experience of BNDES in three great groups. The first group that are experience of the 80s, the second group the experience of the year 2000, then after 2018 that I called non-official scenarios like a hierarchical scenarios, or you want destructured scenarios that comply with some demands. So the experience of the 80s has to be understood under the light of what was the economy at that time. It was a country that was growing at 7% per year, and that suddenly it started into a great debt crisis where growth falls to minus 0.3 at the period, and the inflation that was relatively stable, it became very, very ongoing. So this questioning of the development model of Brazil. And BNDES, with this crisis, we said we have to think about it. It's a turning point, and we have to rethink the role of the bank. But more important than this, there's no growth now. There are no resources for the bank. So let's start planning Brazil. Let's plan the bank. Let's restructure ourselves in order to see how we can continue, how we can structure. So, next one. BNDES is one of the partners. Embraer and Petrobras, both were previous. BNDES comes in the sequence, and then we will also have Embraer that brings a lot of scenarios further on. So this is a context. We had a growth of 11% between 68 and 73. It falls to 7%. And then it caused second oil shock, and different from the first one, the oil shock, we don't have liquidity, but we have a true crisis in the model, and we have to rethink which would be the development strategy of the country and what BNDES could reposition itself in this strategy. Now, so considering this situation, to look at the back mirror, it's not, it doesn't have anything to do. You have great structural changes, and you have to look forward. So the inspiration for these scenarios was a position influenced by the French school of Gaston Berger and Michel Godet on the idea of prospection of the future. These futures are not considered, they have to be counselors. Professor Baruch Castro is called to do this together with Francisco Eduardo Pires de Souza. He starts working with people from the bank in this scenario. The idea is to have a prospection. We're mingling with words in order to create this future. Now we have two experiences in the 80s. The first experience was the experience of 1984, where we're in the middle of the crisis. We're discussing re-democratization of the economy, and we have the campaign Direta Já, and we have specific scenarios. Start with 4, then they go to 2. One is the adjustment, and the second one is the resumption. So these scenarios are very bold. What Caixa and Francisco Eduardo will boost in order to think that Brazil is ready to grow. It can grow from the point of view of its real structure. Their entrepreneurs, Brazil is ready to grow. And they were not wrong, because in fact, what happened is the forecast of growth was 7% for 84-87. The effective growth was 6.1, because we had a boom of the Cruzado plan. So in spite of the 80s being a lost decade, we had 3 years where we had a very high growth, boosted by the Cruzado plan. So the idea, they say, Brazil shouldn't remain in this mediocrity and shouldn't accept this adjustment and should invest in a strategic scenario, and that is the resumption scenario. But afterwards, so they were sure regarding the growth, but totally wrong regarding inflation. The inflation challenging than many of them had thought or discussed. So considering this, what happens in Brazil? Unfortunately, Brazil became what I tell my students, we start a stabilization plan. the competitive integration. And once again, what is important in competitive integration? These scenarios are the greatest experience of scenarios of the NGS. The most known, the one that was enabled to influence different players and different people in the government. It became a hallmark, a trend of the bank. And this is important. What did it say? The export model ended. It's not possible anymore to continue growing in this development model. We have to use the idea that you will integrate the internal market with exports. You have a new paradigm. Microelectronics have to be rethought. The state doesn't have any more conditions to invest because it's broken and the companies don't have resources. We have to call the entrepreneurs and have a new competitive integration. Growth model has to go through the consensus of Washington and update the state, and BNDES became the best. Overcome the inflation, start growing. We started growing, but it's a growth model that will come with transferences of revenues and our growth with the consumption of the masses and also investments with public investments also. So once again, it's a new change of growth where you have the issue of social development, mass consumption, and transference started as of the year 2000. So they said it has to have participation like in the 80s. In the 80s, but the bank was very small at that time, so the participation was easier. So we will have these discussions, and they said it has to be fun. That's something that Oxford recommends. Scenarios are a weapon of communication, so they have to be fun. They have to communicate very well. And good and bad Brazil. This scenario was qualitative. And then we will discuss the mission and the vision and start to go to the targets. No, we were not able to. It was very difficult to transform scenarios into effective and I will defend this. So the scenario where the world is truly, well, the axis of the scenario, the world is a geopolitical issue. If it's easy and geopolitical tension, there's a uncertainty that is we have one or other scenario. And the implementation of a or the pure scenario, it would be the world is a mid. You have, I mean, you if she's mentioning let life take me. So the scenario of they're talking about, she's talking about music and songs here in Brazil, popular music, and so in trying to explore a scenario where, in spite of a bad world, you have a and engage players and forces. These scenarios were the fact that you start having scenario is an exercise that starts having more importance. So you start with a small group during this great discussion, and then you involve technical part. So you start the technological foresight. We used to call sectorial groups and used to ask them which technologies are dominant. So at the same time that you used to use the deductive method, you used to fill in all the stories, the sectorial and technological, with knowledge of the bank, with people that are at the forefront, with the funding, making a foresight and researching. But it's not an academic group of scholars. We're seeing the group trying to decide what projects would be accepted or not, and if you would have all the financial solutions or not only the technological approach. So they used to use also a model of macroeconomical model with different blocks with 200 variables. But long term is a long term, 15 years, even a development bank is too much. We needed other tools to have a strategic talk. So besides these 15 years, we had 3-year scenarios to try to discuss in what direction we were going. If we're going to Sonho Meu route or Deixa a Vida Me Levar. There are 2 different songs in Brazil that show 2 different directions. So a bank like us, that we are regulated, we have the duty to do specific scenarios. And it's difficult to do this at the same time because we have to have the forecast people that give the macroeconomic data that the whole bank has to use in order to assess the projects. And we needed to have financial analysis, and this is a forecast. There are no scenarios here. It's one single track where you bet on it. But you have to have a discussion of the scenarios of the ICAP. I don't know if you know this. ICAP is a demand of the central bank where you have to have scenarios for the bank sector where you can see how much capital you will have. But the rationale of the ICAP is not to have a good solution, which is the maximum capital that you can need. So it's the opposite of the rationale of the scenarios, what we have to do for the strategy to be positive. One strategy with a good solution and the other strategy with the worst solution. What can happen as worse in terms of capital? So many times I had to give answers how I could consider other scenarios. And there is another scenario, the PPA, that comes with another rationale, and they say, which is your plan in order to comply with the PPA? And then different tools that you have to manage and try to find a single results, long-term scenarios with a vision, with a strategy for the company, the forecast scenario for the daily routine, and scenario by cap to comply with the regulator, and the pluriannual ones that you have to conciliate with the government. So difficult exercises. So this is the last scenario that we had. This was presented in 2015, where we said globalization here, but it has a lot of contrast. So it wasn't a great surprise when Trump won. It was a surprise for many people, BNDES, due to this exercise of different scenarios, expecting to have a possibility of these political forces come into force. The great question is what to do with this. How is going the bank to position itself? What does the geopolitical change in the United States impact Brazil and BNDES? The conclusion, China will come with many strategic opportunities for business here. And then we started to go through all the areas and ask, which are the great opportunities in China? In energy, the Chinese are already here. What is changing now in the railways and ports and whatever? And size was not continued. Technologically, I can see it's not a good work. It's a weak work. We don't have a good center of thinking and having foresight for technologies. What we do, we consult the experts that will give their foresight. This structure it doesn't exist, at least up to now. This was the last scenario, and after this we have and songs, and we have the books and the idea. This in 2016. The idea is that the world is tight in a mediocre growth and high level of indebtedness. So how can we leave this? Or we have a great crisis, and this crisis will come with political issues, and the GDP will drop, and we will have a restructuring of the debt, and then you're able to leave, so it'll be war and peace. The scenario was a war and peace, so without suffering, you're not able to reach your limit, you don't know yourself, you cannot recover. That was one of the scenarios, was a bad scenario, and the good scenario of the world would be the scenario, Three Musketeers, where considering the climate challenge, the nations will unite and also search growth and fair one. We're able to build this pact for these public assets and global governance. And this scenario was called the Three Musketeers, one for all and all for one. And this work also was discontinued. So then we have 17, and it's it's very difficult for you to talk about because it's very distant from the daily routine of everybody. Let's have meso scenarios where you get the trends and uncertainties of the world, but instead of discussing Brazil, we discuss directly development banks in the matter. It didn't work also because it still was a higher level of abstraction in my understanding. It wasn't the daily routine of people. And at the same time, to discuss Brazil, it used to engage minds and hearts. To discuss in long term the financial tools, we do this every day. So you don't have to have scenarios for this. Scenarios for us to open our mind and to think out of the box. But we had a number of publications also talking about sectoral agendas and regional agendas. And we had experience with the national government that was a national strategy. Everybody says Brazil doesn't have national strategy. We had a document with IPE and IBG, and the idea was Brazil, a country that is developed. That was 2018, the single publication related to this. Then this is a typical photo of the scenarios because to put canaries in your mind. The people that don't know about the way you're in a coal mine, people put canaries near the mine because they feel the smell of gas and they start dying. So if you see the canaries dying, you know it's time to just go away from the mine. So the idea is to put the canneries in the mine. The group of canneries was called in a subversive way. We're all from the same home. So, for example, we had a scenario of funding discussion where the party was threatened. So people got together to seriously discuss the alternatives, what was happening, which were the possible scenarios, and we had to do, or to discuss uncertainties in policies and institutions very strongly, and we had to discuss all this and also solve scenarios. And we used to take this to the together with planning based on specific demands. We had voluntary groups in order to end, which are, I think, the learnings that I try to show you here first. The scenarios are like bamboo structures. They're done to be temporary, and they have to be reconsidered. They have to be flexible. And this common learning in scenarios. The second one is we cannot have scenarios with great groups. We have to start in a small group with experts, bringing people from abroad, remarkable people. And however, the scenarios have to be discussed internally in the House. We have some way of participation, some kind of consultation, take it to plenary, present, discuss, and people discuss. Because if not, nobody accepts. Because if not, it's going to be without any base. Third, the 80s were more participative and had more percussion, but they were normative and with another context of country. The scenarios were valuable by the bank as an interesting exercise for strategic conversation. It doesn't mean that it is the tool that will really be the planning, but as exercise to start an important strategic conversation. Finally, the idea that I have is that the staff really of the bank values the scenario as a tool for this conversation and a way of influencing. But the problem, you don't have the board support, and if it comes as a request of your council, the capacity of these scenarios influencing the strategic planning and effectively the small decision, it will be very low. Thank you very much. I thank you, Dr. Lavigne, for the fascinating lecture that brings to us in a very, let's say, funny way, talk about the ups and downs, let's say, the advances and the difficulties that they faced. Another point I would like to draw your attention, the famous idea that I am myself, and my circumstances, you have to see the context, but frequently we don't talk about the second part of the sentence that is also important. And if I don't save the circumstance won't save me. So the role of the bank, from what I understood in many moments, was try to save the circumstances in order for the bank to go ahead. So thank you very much. Now we pass now to the third lecture. Dr. Petula Nascimento from Embraer, as I mentioned, is one of the pillars of the Foresight in Brazil. Morning to all of you. Thank you, Ana. I'll speak here a little bit about the process and the structuring of scenario building in Embrapa and research. So area in Embrapa and I participated in the group of scenarios strategies since I arrived here. It's not the area that I coordinate here, also giving superintendent of the strategy area. In Embrapa, we are 43 centralized units. We are divided in 3 specific subjects. We have the centers of production, eco-regional centers, and thematic centers. We only have 2 states today that don't have any units of Embrapa, Rio Grande do Norte and Espírito Santo. And in Brasília, we have 22 performs in partnership with the research organizations of the states of the country. Then we have the state organizations. So the strategy superintendent is connected to the president of Embrapa, and we perform in 4 specific: strategic intelligence, strategic planning, monitoring, assessment, and support to the board. We are in charge of the macro process of intelligence and governance of the company, and we coordinate the intelligence system of Embrapa, that is Agrupensa, and it's in charge also for the issuance of the pluriannual and master plan and business plan and the social record. Embrapa also holds strategic planning since the 90s, and we also talk a bit about the macro process is divided in 3 great axes: science and trends and information that has to do with the strategic intelligence, capturing science and trends in partnership. He is a great partner of Embrapa in this signals and trends with the market, with the ICTs, with the Congress also we have, with the executive powers, so all the powers of the government, and also agriculture. This involves a great network of stakeholders where we are doing the capturing of signals and trends. This also channels the strategies that will guide all the planning of the company in the review of the master plan of the company, business plan, PPA, and the budget also that we have it every year, and all the definition of competitive strategies with strong strength on the strengthening and review of public policies in this relationship with executive power. And internally in Embrapa, we have this follow-up through monitoring and assessment. We have very clear mechanism about the monitoring of this, monitoring technologies for the society, and integrated report and the annual chart of public policy that Embrapa shows every year. The business plan is annual, and it gives communication to the society of what we're doing. So our strategic planning is a plan, the pluriannual plan, that it facilitates our life. Lavinia talked about BDS, but for us, as we do not have the financial system with its specific reports we have in the structure of the federal government, a pluriannual plan as our main support of strategic planning. And we try to have this alignment because in Embrapa, it has a specific program in PPA that is a research and innovation program for agriculture that is under Embrapa. So we do and did in each of the processes of review of the pluriannual plan and align, strategic alignment with the actions of the executive power of all the ministries. These are the ones that we have a direct relation. So each of these ministries that are here listed, we have programs that are linked to these ministries where Embrapa performs in a way, in a research or in adjustments of public policies or other actions for transfers of technology. So within this program here, that is Embrapa's responsibility, our main objective is strengthen the capacity of agriculture, challenging all the upcoming sharing technical and scientific knowledge. But yesterday, in the President Silvia, she mentioned how we need to have a different look regarding responsibility with the commitment of Embrapa beyond agriculture, because we are in fact going through a moment where we have challenges that are very complex, solutions are worse, and we still have to have a look that accompanies us that we have a specific mission. It also is not exempt of performing in everything that has to do with the federal government. So I think this is represented when we see the list of ministries that not only Embrapa has identified, but they also have identified the role of Embrapa for them to be able to comply with the missions of their program. So this, we have a two-way approach with these two bodies. This is the alignment of PPA, this is specifically Embrapa, and for each of these ministries, we have identified indicators that are related to us
and to our commitments. So this will be translated into the planning systems in the federal government, which we call COP. So we create the terms for responsibility that Embrapa will have, and for the pluriannual plan for the federal government. And then we actually bring that to the director plan of Embrapa. And that plan is actually something that Embrapa will do since the 90s. We have that plan for 10 years, but it is reviewed periodically. So the business plan is an annual plan, as I mentioned before. And how does that work? Well, our last update has been done last year, and this is very important because we had a new cycle of government. So this period of 10 years has been adjusted a couple of times. The last one has been last year. And how does it happen? Well, for some years we had partnerships. So Unicamp University would be a partner, GEOP, CGE is also a partner. This consultantship with the external environment. So we have each unit and each research group will have their information gathered, and their main stakeholders will be heard as well, so that we can validate it. We have a consultation with the area of strategic intelligence, which will be in partnership with the teams that are in each research center for Embrapa. And then we go to a internal environment consultation in order to understand what has been identified, and now to compare with the internal environment, right? So this year we had an innovation which was the open participation of the corporate world. So in addition to the consultations, to the research portfolios, and to the management processes, we had created the creation of an email where employees could send their contributions directly, and the end for 2023, 2024, the review of everything. And food transition, climate, energy transition, and digital transformation. So weight to it when we review them. So this is the strategic map for Embrapa. And considering that the global transitions and the national and global policies and the delivery partners and beneficiaries emerge technology aggregated digital inclusion, circular of life. So these are the main points which will guide the Embrapa strategy. And for each one of them, we build a strategic goal, which will derive indicators. So this review will be translated into the business plan, which is agreed upon with the directorate in order to follow the strategy. We had, during the update now, we had a target for 2030, which is to increase the adoption of assets, technological assets. So assets are gaining new indicators as well. And how to control the actions for following the process, structures, and the financial resources, and then we have the availability. What are the products and who them, how create first of all, we are with private participation, so how can we deal with the terms in terms of monetization for the company and scientific publications, right? So we have the adoption here, the impact analysis, products being used, seeds, the rate of adoption, download of technical publications, because we also have as part of science in the company. So the impact and the effects of the adoption of those studies something here which is a more and more current. With the SDGs, and Embrapa is very much committed to this network, and they have participation in a network within Embrapa that is actively monitoring the federal government, comparing that to the SDGs. So we have a whole alignment with this planning phase and the information that we generate. Understand that it is important, and how important it is in order for us to plan for the future. And even if sometimes, this has not been requested officially by the government, we kept doing it because we consider that to be important. strategic intel area. We have a group there, which is which is the Agropensa. Yesterday, our chair said that this is still being updated, so is to have that in April. The chairwoman will speak more about the evolution of Agropensa and how it is being developed and what we are proposing in terms of innovation for the system. It is still the basis for the formulation of PDI strategies in the company. It counts on many research groups. Also part of the actions that Embrapa is taking with our partners abroad. So Embrapa has 2 labs abroad. One is in we have those doctors portraying all of the trends that we can see, and they help us there. So now in our webpage you have the circles there. Each one is an area. So you have, for instance, the Center for Intelligence and Marketing and Agriculture. You have the and then this is very much used by the ministry as well. And we also have an observatory for trends in ag and intelligence, and also other kinds of meat production. And also have the Rural Women Observatory. We have many documents, several documents are generated. Some of them have become mega trends, as we said. So we have sustainability, digital agro, climate change adaptation, technology, and the governance and the risks of each sector, and the transformation of part of the. You have a couple of documents which will have specific topics such as COVID and safety and dairy production. So we had some trends or soil in 2020 for 2030. We understand that soil will be one of the strategic components of our sector. So we had work done with the stakeholders and with the universities for us to come up with this scenario and understand the risks and opportunities. We have documents which are the assessment of productivity, and then we also have the system for assessment of the strategy itself, right? So it is done according to a document which is the social balance, which is sent to us every year during the date of Embrapa's birthday. So we will present that this year by the end of April. So Embrapa has a social nucleus of 125 billion real. So for each one of those real invested, we have a return that is about 34.7 back to society. So that is the whole strategic planning, and everything happens within that program that I showed, and that's how we assess how we deliver everything. And so the social balance will have this general coordinations, which is assessment of impact, be it economic, social, or environmental, in employability. And it is a methodology that has been enhanced during the last few years, and we now have benchmark being done with the institutions, and they are our partners. We have INGIA and INHAR in Argentina and Uruguay. We have state organizations for research. We have API in São Paulo. We have NDE in Paraná State. We have MPAG as well. And this shows the government how much return they have when you invest in science and technology in a sector such as agriculture. So this is part of this new cycle of planning and delivery. And now we are working now with consolidation of the strategic intelligence of the company and the delivery of those reports back to society. Strategic information and data are the basis for us to have decision making going. We realized that with the new alignment of the presidents and the directorate, that we have concern with intelligence, artificial intelligence, and we talked about how important it is last night and during dinner, and how important that is for us to plan, to strategize to society. So this is everything I had to talk to you about, and
Esse, né? Então,
so this is the one, right? So Embrapa nowadays is planning to use the AI tools in a more comprehensive way in our planning process, and also to transfer technology and to make information available. So we'll have a tender this year. So the public profiles will be bringing this need that Embrapa has. And I think this is the proposal that we had to present to you, to speak a little bit about the scenarios, strategic planning, and we have been looking for convergency in the construction of scenarios for challenges and possible futures. The issue of literacy, and Célia has been questioning that together with the president, the training for a team of strategic planners. So we have been creating the whole and will be on the next of a learning company. Thank you, Ms. Nasser, for have shown us the very sophisticated system had in the system for agribusiness in Brazil. It's not for nothing. It's not things happen. So congratulations, and if you agree, I would love to use your presentation as a posthumous homage to Mr. Farinelli, who passed away in June last year. And he has been a Minister of Agriculture, and during the last 3 decades, he has been a defender of the research and the knowledge incorporation in the agri-system. During many years, he has been the counselor for CGE. I think he was the counselor became going over time. All the Embrapa specifically. So we have done quite a lot, but it's not a guarantee that strong presence of the surname is here in the session. That shows that, well, Nascimento means birth, so we're looking at the future now. It's always a challenge to be the last speaker. Actually, myself and Petula, besides the surname, we also have a common life. We went to the same school and we had the same teachers. We took the same course. So the name is just no more detail. I would like to say thanks to Anna for this invitation. It's really good to be here and talking to you guys. They are friends of mine for a couple of decades now, and it's pretty interesting to see that she has been telling us the scenario of the development bank, and we have been participating together. I had the experience in Petrobras for a couple of years. I've been there for more than 10 years. History that go back long. One advantages is that we work in this scenario since 1989, and we actually started together. I found a document of Petrobras, BNDES, the bank, and then Petrobras and the Eletrobras. So we had this first initiative in 1989 to start thinking about the future. So you have been there before us, and Petrobras is from 1989. And what I'm going to bring to you here is the scenario that we have been working with today. So we have been working with that historically. Those scenarios have been perfected over time. So we, in the beginning, had a lot of qualitative scenarios, always with a lot of strategic positioning, and also we got a more quantitative aspect of it because this is the basis for planning in the company. So we have worked with many methodologies, with the Shell methodology that we adopted since GBN, and also many other methodologies. And nowadays we have a bit of Petrobras methodology, right? Because we have a new reality and we have adapted to it. So what I mean here is how we are working with the 2050 scenario, and it's a bit scary to think about so much time, but it goes over 30 years, right? So the amount of planning and strategy that you have to have is about 30 years. So you have to have a long-term view, and this is the essence of the Petrobras business that makes it mandatory to have this long-term view. They have to have legitimacy in this scenario, so the participation, and especially the participation of the decision makers, is very, very important, because they have to understand why the world can change or not change, and what opportunities represented by those changes. And another thing is the continuity. So historically we would have a 4-year scenario forecast, or whenever you had an extreme event. But the thing is that now we have extreme events going all the time, you know, wars, COVID. So for the industry, this is very serious. I think, can we go back one slide? So we have, and should we think about the future? Well, we want to know what we want to become, right? So what do we want to do and be? What are the threats, the opportunities that I can have along the way? And well, for oil and gas, we have a lot of long-term investments, and they have to mature over a long DNA, right? Think about the future, and you have to have long-term decisions as well. So nowadays, in order to change our portfolio, we are like a transatlantic vessel. Turn all of a sudden. You don't get $100 billion and deal with that in one day, right? You have to do that with a structure and a strategy that happens over time. So we have to balance the investments with the uncertainties that we have in the external environments, and because we will find uncertainties and obstacles along the way, and the companies, the oil companies, that are actually questioning themselves quite a lot right now. So if you don't follow the industry, you probably don't know, but we have a lot of industries that are actually joining the low carbon era, but they're actually getting a step back now. And so we want to be very assertive. We want to make a very solid turn and not look back. So we have this continuous flow. We don't have like the every 4 year scenario forecast. We always start with the lessons learned, so we identify the gaps. We start by gap scenarios and the possible scenarios that we might have. So we interview all the and all of the C, which are the managers who make decisions. So we update the informations and we idealize all of the areas of the company. So we have the privilege of having a great center for research, which is called CENT. And we have specialists and scientists in all area of knowledge. So from robotics to solar panels and hydrogen use. So we have all of the experts that can show us the view of the future. Then we get to a part of the scenario, the logic of the scenarios and the quantification. So we usually use 3-4 scenarios. Everything is quantified, and it's important to have quantification because this will be the way we decide on investment. So a production and exploration project should be a positive return project when you have the 3 scenarios, be it the high price or average price or low price scenario, because we don't know how the world will behave in the next few years. So it should be resilient to any scenario. So when we speak about oil, it's easy, right? But when you talk about refining, it's harder because you have many products there. You have diesel, jet fuel, you have lubrifiers, you have rubber. So you have a bunch of products and you have to specify all of them. You have to quantify all of the possibilities with all of those different products that you have for 3 or 4 scenarios each. So we have a huge team trying to model and simulate those scenarios with more structural models and more economical models in order to support each possibility here. So we have a 5th stage, which is the narrative. So we have the history of the scenario that is more and more robust. And then we have a new stage, which is the peer review. We are inviting external and internal analysts to check the consistency of those scenarios. So to check whether or not we have contradictions. In the previous scenario, we would have a great dilemma, and I know we have many economists here. We had the dilemma about the energy transition accelerating or bringing a halt to this update. So the transition would be quicker and would bring lower economic growth. And when I saw the demand of energy and also even with the elasticity of the GDP and having more of elasticity in a transition scenario, when I get to a higher volume of electricity, I would have less economy. So it wouldn't make sense to invest so much for energy transition where the demand for electricity would be lower. So I actually decided I needed to have a peer review happen in order to understand whether the numbers and the stories would make sense. So this would provide disclosure as well, right? So we would disclose a little bit of our scenarios. We had a couple of publications in 2018 because, of course, we had a pandemic and everything went to sleep, so to speak. We were still working, but we were not reporting as much, and now we are bringing back this intention of bringing more visibility. So talking a little bit about each one of those stages, we have the first stage, which is to identify the gaps and to incorporate that into the scenarios. So the idea is to listen to the public, the players who are interested, and to see what is missing. So we work a lot with the climate management. So we elaborate the scenarios hand in hand with the climate team, because the energy scenario has changed quite a lot. So the carbon price, the effect of that price, and many things that we wouldn't consider before, the potential of Brazil for NBS. So we have been now incorporating that this is something that came from the area of climate studies. The second stage would be the perception of the administration, so the senior administration. We have seen the possibility of actually listening to people, different view there, and that would be enriching to the analysis. The third stage, which is, well, still in this second stage, we have the perception of the senior administration about many different topics. So we see the issue of society itself and their habits and behaviors, because what changes society is the change in habits and how much society is willing to pay for these changes. So this is very important to understand, and we see that there are generational issues. So when we look at a younger generation and compare to the older generations, we have very distinct habits. And I don't know if you have kids or not, but for drivers, my generation, the most important thing was to buy a car, right? So this new generation don't see any value in this, and if they can bike, they will do that, right, instead. So technology is crucial. So we a lot about wind power and solar power. So we mentioned China, and I always remember that we would visit TikTok there, and we didn't understand what they did. So we went to China to see TikTok, and we were wondering, how do these people make money? And now TikTok is all trendy, and we didn't visualize that back then. So wind power and solar power, it's very competitive because they have been getting cheaper for both the panels and also the turbines. So this makes everything easier, and the more technology and the more mass, the easier and cheaper it will get. And why are still we using oil? Well, because it's the cheapest energy available in terms of energetic density. The density of fossil fuels is huge compared to any other fuel available. So when I overcome that technologically with a competitive cost, I will quickly overcome oil. The environmental issue, of course, we'll speak a lot about technology, and so nowadays we don't have any questions about the consumption of the environment. In the world of energy, we have no way of avoiding talking about geopolitics. So nowadays we have clarity about that. We have a huge concentration of resources for oil, be it in very restricted regions or the restriction in technology. So we talk about China today, and it's a very important resource that they have there, which is the innovation strategy for technology. And also, of course, economy, the economic growth and the distribution of the economy, which is a huge thing when we look at the difference between the per capita consumption in Europe and the United States, and when we compare to Brazil, Africa, or China and India, this is a huge gap. We're talking about 6-7 times more consumption sometimes. So we usually will talk about a fair energy transition, right? Because we have to first transform the transition and assure the access to energy for a huge group of people who are still not able to access energy, because energy is quality of life and health. So this is very important to correlate. And then we have the third stage, where we present the relevant topics, which are the driving forces. So those are the forces that are actually changing the world trends and Brazilian trends as well. And then we have those groups for ideation, which will work with each topic and forecast each one of them. So some important topics as well. So we have here the oil prices. We have extreme effects here, such as the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, that threw the price down. And now after that, we had the Ukraine-Russia war. So we have a higher price of oil now due to the more recent issues of Hamas and in the Middle East with Israel. So that is a lot of uncertainty that we have, and the variable that is the core of the cash flow of the company. So we have to understand the extremes and to be prepared to any one of those.
The second great issue for oil is the climate change. How quick all the regulation of these climate changes and how the government will fund or support this transition is very important. So we have this in highlight for IRA, that is Innovation Induction Act, that is doing a good investment in renewables in the United States. The Repower Union, that is also a great incentive, the European Union for these issues. And here we can highlight the Conservation Act from India, a specific one from Japan. We don't talk about China because we know the 10-year plans of China for a long time. It's not by chance that China is the greatest investor in renewables and nuclear. All these issues are the great highlights in terms of renewables in China. And now another one that is very critical for us to understand is penetration of electrical vehicles in the countries. So we have here a highlight, the percentage of sales of electrical vehicles in different countries, as we have different realities. We have Norway today, 80% sales, 20% are electrical ones. Different from other countries, even from Brazil. Brazil, we still have an issue of minors number because of our matrix with biofuel emissions in Brazil. The problem is not in the energy sector. It's not mainly because of the energy sector, as the main countries involved. Our main emission, Petrobras knows this very well, is the issue of the use of the soil and also deforestation. And then we have this discussion here by thematic tables. We have each table has specifically with one subject, and people go around all these tables because you have the opportunity to listen to a number of people regarding different issues. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and we call people with different views. People from reservoirs to production unit, from fish, from finance, because we're able to have a very multiple view from each of the subjects, and we have this ideation that will be the core of this scenario. So we start to design what world are we going to, always with the Italian scenario, talking about the world backwards, how is it going to be in 2050? So we imagine that we will have three possibilities. This is very theoretical. We're still working on this. And it has a fourth scenario that I didn't mention that is exact, that all these scenarios are predictive ones. We have a scenario is a normative one. It is how would a net zero in 2050? What would I need? What would the world and Brazil need to do in order to reach 2050 with zero emissions? Why do we have these scenarios as normative? Because we don't have technology today that is sufficient or sufficient resources or international commitments in order to reach net zero. So we have to go backwards when we calculate a net zero scenario with zero emissions in 2050. In our scenarios here, we have the example of three rhythms of transition of the energy, moderate and accelerated ones. And in order to reach this, we have to have changes of habits and behaviors, different ones. Accelerated world in the energy transition, we have to have different ways of consumption and habits. Need a lot of international coordination. This supposition, of course. This is important because we can see towards where we're going with the world when we start seeing how each of these elements are behaving. If we start having, let's talk about real world. If I have Trump coming back, and we have a reduction in the United States, we start going towards the slower one, let's say. And the actions on the daily will allow us to monitor the way the scenarios are going. And the final that we call the quantifications. Here we have on one example of quantification. We quantify energy matrix in the world. So these stories are materialized in numbers. So in this case, we have different energy matrix with composition between fossil and renewables, and each scenario had different oil prices. Each other scenario have different amounts of biofuels, CO2 emissions that are different also. So we have all this calculation together with the scenarios. And the fifth stage is the use. So how I commented at the beginning, the scenarios of Petrobras are the core of the strategic planning process. It's the first stage of the strategic plan of the company. So the scenarios have Vision 2050. We have a strategic plan with vision, mission, and values with this vision of 2050, but we are also a business plan that is a 5-year plan and an annual plan that is a 1-year plan. This business plan is all quantified. I will talk about CapEx and investments, talk about all the details, but also we use for the assessment of reservoirs, for impairment, and post-project, and assessment of the projects. In Petrobras, everybody knows all the scenarios. Everybody has the name of the scenarios because each of them, they have their own projects. They know the old ones were resilience, base, and growth. This was the previous management in our scenarios. That's what we were able to do in the past management. We were not very creative. And everybody know the price of the oil and at what it is in the back, because they know if it's a IP project, it will be different to be approved in a low scenario price, and if it's a renewal plan, they are more able to be approved in a transition scenario. So we understand in this way, we bring to reality a great part of the company's team this way of thinking of the world differently from what it is today, because the only certainty that we have is we do not know. For a long time, I made a forecast of oil price, and they asked, "Are you sure?" I said, "The only certainty that I have is that I'm going to be wrong. I'm sure I'm going to be wrong, but I need a number to be the base, and I have to have a fan of options. I have to have an in-between number. So we don't need impairment if this price is not that. The only certainty is that we're not be correct with the assessments." And then we reach the results. That is a plan that we disclose every year. Our business plan we review every year with this 5 years forward. This business plan that was disclosed in November last year, it forecasts 24-28 of $102 billion. We still have part of our investment still in production, on almost 70%, because we are at transatlantic. But it's important for us to change it. And that's what we're showing. Our investment for low carbon is ongoing, and today it represents 11% of capex of the plan. So you see in the last year it's been growing, and more than that, when we see the yearly investment until 2028, we start with 6% and reach from 28 with 16% of total of our capex. So that shows that in fact the company is changing, is understanding it's unavoidable, the energy transition. It will happen. The great uncertainty in what rhythm, in what pace, and it's followed up with the different scenarios and what is happening. I thank Renata, her excellent presentation that shows, confirms that Petrobras is an international company, not only in technology, but also places where we work in future studies, that is Shell, for example, that is and team the and COVID and so on, I would also like to draw your attention. We start extreme events in the company, inside the company. Therefore, this reinforces the importance of having a professional team in Chile, and you're an example of the 20 years, but we know the SIMP is also another. The different reasons this company is to constitutional events. In spite of having a very important so our capacity of we'll use the same because these are different processes. PPA is the government planning, and we have our company's planning. So then we have an us organized because the administration council and in music we have violins here. There are three so you have the same tutor or whatever you're going to say your name. Your natures are different. In Brapa, although a company with private use was Embraer allowed to in case of BNG and has regulations in Brazil and Switzerland and global regulation. Petrobras, although once in a while we don't consider this, it's a market company that is in the market, and that's it. So the institutional nature of each of you I would like to congratulate Customer
Eu estou a ouvir muito mal. Guilherme, eu não sei se me está a ouvir. Eu estou a ouvir com muita interferência e muito mal. Consegue ouvir-me ou não? Está a ouvir-me? É que eu não estou a ouvir nada do vosso lado. Queria só perceber se está a ouvir. Então, eu posso começar a falar? Posso? Eu vou ser muito breve, e apenas queria felicitar Ana Célia Castro e esta iniciativa da cooperação Brasil-China. De facto, do ponto de vista da Europa, mas hoje podemos dizer que é consensual no mundo, que vivemos um tempo novo, um tempo particularmente gerado por uma enorme incerteza, como nunca tinha sido experimentado num contexto geopolítico particularmente fragmentado. Há cerca de 2 semanas atrás, as Nações Unidas, através da Agência para o Desenvolvimento, a UNDP, lançou o novo relatório 2023-24, exatamente sobre o tema da cooperação internacional no mundo polarizado. Há cerca de um ano atrás, o relatório do desenvolvimento humano era sobre tempos de incerteza e, obviamente, como mudar o mundo num mundo em transformação. E este complexo de incerteza, nunca visto na história da humanidade, inclui níveis de desenvolvimento muito desiguais, uma desigualdade a aumentar ao nível do mundo, e ao contrário daquilo que se pensava há 20 anos atrás, as próprias tecnologias de informação e os sistemas avançados de informação têm aumentado esta desigualdade. Ou, por outras palavras, quem tem acesso aos sistemas avançados de informação e consegue usá-los está em crescente vantagem face àqueles que usam telemóveis, mas que não têm acesso ao conhecimento gerado por sistemas de informação e comunicação. E por isso, como o relatório do desenvolvimento humano claramente transmite, nós estamos perante 3 tendências particularmente críticas para perceber o contexto da pesquisa e da inovação, e mais uma vez reconheço que é central ao tema deste encontro. Por um lado, as desigualdades e as pressões que destabilizam o nosso planeta ao nível daquilo que se chama a emergência do antropoceno, e vivemos, temos que perceber que há umas semanas atrás a Sociedade Internacional de Geógrafos e de Antropógrafos recusou a entrada numa nova era, e por isso não temos ainda as evidências necessárias que estamos numa nova era nos termos científicos assim definido, mas sabemos que temos forças destabilizantes ao nível do mundo. E, por outro lado, temos em muitas zonas do mundo, incluindo a América Latina, transformações sociais para fazer face a estas desigualdades crescentes, e, por outro lado, temos a intensificação de polarização política em todo o mundo, certamente aqui na Europa, mas também na América do Norte e na América do Sul, com movimentos chamados populistas a ganharem uma tendência crescente, e o Brasil conhece bem essas tendências. É neste contexto que eu penso que é importante percebermos aquilo que na Europa temos chamado, no último ano, a necessidade crescente de perceber a pesquisa e a inovação centrada nas pessoas. A questão é dar nova centralidade às pessoas, de uma forma que também a transição verde, a transição ecológica seja feita essencialmente tendo as pessoas no seu centro, para a qual é central uma nova e uma revisitada políticas de ciência e de inovação. Se há 20 anos atrás, uma das questões que inundava a Europa, mas também os Estados Unidos e a América Latina, era a procura por mais cientistas. Por exemplo, a Europa aumentou consideravelmente o número de pesquisadores e de inovadores nos últimos 20 anos. Hoje representam cerca de 2 milhões de pessoas na Europa, representando 1% da força bruta de trabalho, mas a questão crítica é que a qualidade do trabalho de pesquisa e de inovação não acompanhou o aumento do número de pessoas. E isto tornou, em muitos pontos na Europa, por exemplo, e sabemos que é genérica em todo o mundo, uma maior precariedade no trabalho científico e no trabalho de inovação. Isto levou vários pesquisadores, nomeadamente nos Estados Unidos e cada vez mais na Europa, a questionar o que significa hoje política industrial e, sobretudo, a mostrar que a política industrial tem que ter no cerne e no seu centro a qualidade do trabalho gerado. Por exemplo, na Europa, estamos a discutir até que ponto é que as políticas de ciência podem levar em consideração estes aspectos, nomeadamente, por exemplo, em dois aspectos críticos. Por um lado, na avaliação das atividades de pesquisa e inovação, desde a avaliação ao nível dos projetos, como a avaliação ao nível das instituições, de uma forma que a qualidade do trabalho dos pesquisadores seja considerada em paralelo com a qualidade e o impacto dos resultados. Isto é uma alteração profunda naquilo que é a forma de avaliar os projetos de pesquisa e de inovação e, por isso, de distribuir o financiamento. Por outro lado, a capacidade de conseguirmos ao mesmo tempo eu estou a receber uma mensagem da Ana Célia.
Now I have a message.
Tem algum problema? Posso continuar? Portanto, diria eu, a questão crítica, que para além dos sistemas de avaliação da própria atividade de pesquisa e de avaliação, a necessidade também de lançar novas formas de financiar o desenvolvimento de carreiras científicas e de carreiras de inovação, quer no setor privado, quer no setor público. E a questão crítica, mais uma vez, é centralizar e dar uma centralidade nova às pessoas. Ora, o vosso debate surge num momento particularmente crítico, de grande polarização política no mundo e de conflitos geopolíticos cada vez mais crescentes, onde a relação com o Sul é cada vez mais determinante. Foi para isso que lançámos também com a vossa colaboração e
And
com muitos
with your
dos
cooperation,
presentes, a iniciativa de uma rede informal, a que chamamos o conhecimento para as pessoas, para o planeta, através de parcerias, K4P Alliances, aonde a Ana Célia Castro tem participado na sua dinamização e promoção, sobretudo para perceber ações concretas aonde a inovação, o desenvolvimento e a atividade de pesquisa beneficia da cooperação internacional. É importante dizer que, por um lado, a China tem mecanismos de proteção próprios de grande parte da pesquisa desenvolvida com financiamento militar e, cada vez mais, essa é a situação, como sabemos, que caracteriza o desenvolvimento dos Estados Unidos. Hoje, na Europa, discute-se também como proteger a atividade de investigação, sobretudo face àquilo que foi as tendências dos últimos 10 anos de promover a ciência aberta. E esta é uma questão nova, também para os cientistas e para o contexto da inovação, porque, obviamente e teoricamente, desenvolvemos que o conhecimento deve ser aberto para todos. A National Science Foundation dos Estados Unidos publicou há umas semanas atrás um novo relatório sobre a proteção dos resultados da atividade de pesquisa nos Estados Unidos, argumentando que esse processo deve ser feito caso a caso, projeto a projeto. Em todo o caso, sabemos que, no mundo hoje, a investigação e a atividade científica está longe de estar totalmente aberta e, por isso, por um lado, a necessidade clara de promover uma ciência aberta a todos, porque sabemos que é um fator de desenvolvimento. E há questões críticas, no âmbito das quais lançámos a rede K4P Alliances, sobretudo com a alteração ecológica e o meio ambiente. Por exemplo, a necessidade de hoje aprofundarmos o nosso conhecimento sobre os sistemas e sobre os processos de fixação e sequestro de carbono, no qual o Brasil é um potencial um, interessado devido à enorme extensão de áreas florestais, a começar desde logo na Amazónia, mas também aos maiores e mais representativos manguezais em zonas tropicais, sobretudo no contexto da América Latina. Os 5 principais biomas são todos eles centros com potencial crescimento da capacidade de fixação e de sequestro do carbono. Isto levanta novos problemas científicos, sobretudo sobre a monitorização desse potencial de fixação de carbono, mas também, para além da sua monitorização, a sua valorização económica. Os sistemas de certificação têm sido contestados ao nível do mundo e veja-se há pouco tempo, há poucos meses, a investigação que o jornal Guardian, na Inglaterra, lançou sobre a falsidade de muitos do que eram os argumentos usados por grandes operadores mundiais para a quantidade de toneladas que conseguiam fixar de carbono. E por isso temos, por exemplo, aqui uma questão emergente que requer novos desafios científicos, sobretudo para conseguirmos melhor medir e caracterizar a capacidade de fixar carbono, mas também a valorização económica desses ativos naquilo que se chamam os mercados de carbono. O carbono, de facto, hoje está a preços muito baixos, porque de facto resultam da dificuldade de certificar e de regular os mercados de carbono. E aí a cooperação com os países do Sul, em particular com a América Latina, o Brasil e a África, são particularmente determinantes. E, portanto, apesar de estarmos num seminário da cooperação Brasil-China, penso que este tema é particularmente crítico, como dar melhor relevância à cooperação científica num mundo polarizado, mas também com conflitos geopolíticos a uma escala como nunca desde a Segunda Guerra Mundial tínhamos vivido, aonde a transição ecológica e aquilo que é as alterações climáticas assumem uma gravidade que não podem ser mais uma vez, ou não devem ser mais uma vez, adiada devido a outras questões. E por isso, para a vossa reflexão e também para aqueles que na comunidade científica e de inovação do Brasil têm olhado para os problemas não apenas da Amazónia, mas sobretudo da capacidade de armazenar carbono em grandes superfícies, um apelo para a necessidade de aprofundar o contexto científico deste tipo de projetos, porque, obviamente, a caracterização deste processo é particularmente importante. E por isso, uma mera observação para também agradecer e reconhecer mais uma vez à Ana Célia Castro e ao vosso movimento de perceber a cooperação, neste caso Brasil-China, num contexto tão complexo de, obviamente, polarização da vida política em todo o mundo, na América Latina, na América do Norte, na Europa, e aonde, obviamente, os valores intrínsecos à própria democracia estão muitas vezes em causa quando se fecha o conhecimento devido a razões geoestratégicas ou geopolíticas, obviamente, face a agressões às democracias que temos hoje no mundo por regimes autocráticos. E esta polarização da vida política está, obviamente, a afetar a cooperação científica à escala do mundo e por isso a necessidade sempre de a debater de uma forma aberta, como penso que estão a fazê-la neste encontro Brasil-China. Porque, obviamente, é determinante para o futuro percebermos como podemos não apenas continuar a produzir mais conhecimento, porque precisamos dele, mas também a difundir esse próprio conhecimento. Muito obrigado a todos e peço perdão pela falta de comunicação e espero que o som tenha conseguido chegar aí. Muito obrigado. Ana Célia? Ah, sim, sim. Sim, sim. Obrigado. Muito obrigado. Ari, é sempre um prazer trabalhar convosco e espero que possamos, quer no Rio, ou em São Paulo, ou em Lisboa, ou em Bruxelas, ou em Pequim, ou em Nova Iorque, voltarmos a encontrar em breve. Muito obrigado.
I want from our see this improve the living standards of people. China that has happened in Europe and happened in America, and then they invented their own and they modified these technologies, and then they exported it for the global things. This happened, and so here we have a we need to debate and for whom these technologies are, whether it is for the people or for the rest of the world or for the economy. And we also need to see there exists the technology is not a kind of a common spectrum, and we have indigenous technologies or the local technologies. We do have the conventional technologies. We do have the advanced technologies like digital technologies, and we do have disruptive technologies that is replacing our business as usual scenarios. And this need to be clarified, and I'm not sure how far the scenario analysis and has captured and all this the wide spectrum of technology that exist. It is a very difficult, and for example, in the case of the digital agriculture, and it is completely different from what happened during the Green Revolution in the 1960s. Green Revolution happened at the farm level. Value chain. It is a kind of there is no spot. Basically, it is a widespread at the society level. How we can capture the realities, and what are the hard spots that we need to identify and technology and innovation, it has to become with finance. Who is going to finance these investments on the innovations? Here it is a murky picture, and most of our initial technological inventions and basically it is all curiosity driven by the individual researchers. It is supported by the national budget and it is coming from the science and technological funds, or sometimes it's a private funds and some philanthropic funding. But there is also other type of funding that is a kind of mission oriented, and that is where China and Korea and Japan are now moving in. And this is basically, they wanted to be a leader in, for example, 5G technologies or the electrical vehicles. And Elon Musk put a lot of his fortunes on the EVs, and Toyota has put it in the hybrid. But they basically couldn't able to predict the future, and they invested a lot on the hybrid. Now they are kind of a locked in situation, and they could not able to come out of it. This also happened in the fossil fuels, and there's a lot of public funding is going on the R&D, and which is very much mission driven. On the other hand, this is individual researchers. There is a curiosity driven. Technological inventions is very, we know that is how as a researchers we are struggling to get pennies, and but on the other hand, the huge potential is available, and now this is the international financing is also coming in. For example, climate change technologies and the carbon market, the capital market is, venture capitalists are ready for it. They are looking for an ideas that doesn't have the market now, but they are looking for the market in the future. There are some venture capitals, for example, in most of the Europe and the institutional investors, and in Asia, and they have plenty of resources, but this resources doesn't have any emotional values. So how we can capture? I think that need to be discussed, and what could be the correct financial or kind of a crowdfunding model, where you have the public resources, you have the private resources, and we have the international resources that can support. This need to be discussed, and it has to be reflected in the scenario planning, and we do work on the scenario planning, but it's very difficult, and how to capture the realities, and so most of our scenario plannings are limited to 2 or 3 major, and in the short term and the medium term, and we know there is how difficult it is to predict the future. Future is full of uncertainties. But we need to address these assumptions that is we make. My third and the last point is about our capacity and capability to do this scenario analysis in type of kind of meeting the political objectives. You know, there are several political economic issues, and it happened in 1960s and 1970s, and when Japan wanted to become, I think they are the second largest economy. And one day they predicted that it may overseed US. But the global, there is already a player, established players, and in the case of a technology innovation, and they don't want to leave the space for other emerging powers to come in. This is the hard reality of the political power and the political economy. And it happened to Japan in 1970s, and when they are exceeding and they are far reaching this computational power. And there is several trade-related measures, and that has been barred and it has been slowed down. It could happen in China also. And there is I think the political economy is moving, and how to contain China. And it has some implications. And our scenario analysis unfortunately could not able to bring this into models, that is estimated models. and it is very difficult. But this uncertainties exist, and we need to, as researchers, we need to address it. Another uncertainty is like a political economy, and this technological landscape also be affected by the shocks. The shocks that is coming from economic shocks like 2008 financial crisis. And many public and the private funding has basically retarded, and they scaled down because the government and the private sector doesn't have the fiscal space to spend on the innovations and the technologies. Second thing is it happened in the COVID, and that is within a year, and the global forces has been put forward, and they could be able to develop a vaccine. So crisis is a kind of a blessing and also kind of a curse. So how we can predict this kind of a potentials when we are developing the scenario analysis, or when we are developing a kind of a technological roadmap. So we need to take into consideration this kind of uncertainties that could be a kind of a blessings. And this is a COVID-19 is a classical example, and where there is the whole world is looking for a solution. And the US, I think Trump, we are blaming Trump, but he could be able to release the projects with a mission with unlimited funding. This also happened when we sent the first man to the moon, and the NASA had at the time it is unlimited funding. But they had a mission goal, and US wanted to be the first one to land the moon. So they have a national goal, and so national goals comes with that committed funding, and then this committed fundings are translated into a research infrastructure where multiple institutions come together. So my last point is that is also one thing that is a reality, and our scenario plannings are predicting the future, and this predicting the future is with a lot of uncertainties. So how we develop scenarios, it is all based on what type of assumptions that is we make. These assumptions need to be very real. And if you go to close to the reality, then your output will become close to the reality. But somehow we are ambitious, and we often neglect. One of the negligence that is we make, and I do that is net zero modeling for the ASEAN 16 countries. But what we often neglect is this technology and the innovations happening in the silos. The governments doesn't work they are not a kind of a monolithic organization. Agriculture Ministry, they has its own silos, and their policy making, their technology development happen within one. For example, digital agriculture, they need to cooperate with the infrastructure, that is the ICT ministry, but it is not happening. And similarly, that is the energy policies, and this technology, it has to be aligned with the trade and investment. There is a custom rules are there, and so this is a hard reality, and our scenario often neglect, and we assume that there is a one monolithic government that is looking at innovation as a kind of an economy-wide activity, but in reality it is happening in silos, and we need to address as researchers, and we need to improve our institutional capacity building. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Andromoj, for your excellent contribution here to this debate. I would highlight 2 points of what you said. The second one in the reverse order here, I would start by saying, by highlighting the institutional issue. Right? The government is not a monolith. It has many different components, and I I think it is interesting that you mentioned the financial crisis that we had in 2008, for instance, and its reflections. And the best experience that I know in Brazil of trying to deal with integration between governments to deal with certain missions was back in the day in Fernando Henrique Cardoso's second mandate, when we had the Brazil in Action program and the Avança Brasil program. So this program was the first one that would use project management in the public sector, and it has been instrumental to have in it the participation of a former executive manager of the government back in the day, when they had the possibility of creating many initiatives and making those initiatives work, including the cooperation between Brazil and Bolivia and the transformation of the northeastern region in a tourist attraction point, and more very many varied issues that happened as well, and also dealing with child labor, and that has been tackled in an integrated manner by the ministries. And the first thing that you mentioned that caught my attention very much is the difficulty of forecasting. And I remember a phrase by a manager who was also a thinker, which is Peter Drucker. He says that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So you have to predict it by creating it. So I think the companies that we have here are companies that are contributing to the creation of this future, not only to try and look at what is going to happen ahead of us. And Anna, if you agree, let's do the following. I will pass the floor quickly to some comments that you might have about Manuel Heitor and Boboshi, and if you want to comment on anything, then we can share our remarks with the public, and then by the end you will have the wrap-up moment, okay? If you have any specific timing, thing that you want to come up with. Yes, I have something, Professor, that I think the professor mentioned some of the points that we can visualize, right? During the post-COVID period, I think we had a learning process that has been in regards to production of technology. So during the COVID era, Embrapa has intensified the actions of e-learning. So we have an e-camp platform. So when we came back to in-person work and reviewing policies and also technology transfer in the federal government, we also realized that only e-learning by itself wouldn't be the only tool that we should use. And now in 2023, 24, we are coming back to the need of having a new design for technology transfer in person as a complementary action to the e-learning action. So we realize that new tools also have to come back to this design for availability of technologies and also to generate knowledge. Yesterday we talked a little bit about gamification, and we realized that we need to better design those scenarios with that learning in mind. So many institutions have had that, and they need to share that. And along the lines of integrating the institutions, which has been mentioned, we understand that we have the need to integrate more and more. And last year, I think we had a clear example that has been the sanitary emergency of the bird flu, and we had the federal government work in jointly with the Ministry of Agriculture, which is the owner of the policy for zoo animal health and animal health measures and emergency measures. So Embrapa is part of that group, and we realized how positive it was for us to have all of those actions being taken in order to avoid a new pandemic. So we had been working quite a lot with MS and MSA. And another example of this would be, I think, the construction of the Brazilian taxonomy, and it goes a little bit along the lines of what Emmanuel mentioned as well, so about the ecological transition. So the government is working with 8 sectors for constructing this taxonomy. So 3 sectors are transversal, and Embrapa, together with the Ministry of Treasury, is dealing with the design of agroeconomy and energy. So we have also Treasury, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also other entities. In health, the same goes with the Ministry of Health and the Fiocruz Foundation. And so I think we go along those lines, of the learning experience that we had in elaborating the plans, the integrated plans, and the strategies for the country as a whole. I think that's what I had. Lavinia, anything? No? So let's go to the public. I'll go to the stage so I can look at you guys. Well, the floor is open now. Any comments? Can you just say your name so that we can register that for history's sake? Well, almost good afternoon now. I would like to say thank you all for being here. My name is Yuri Lima. I work with Professor Jano in the Future Lab at the University of Rio de Janeiro. And my question goes along the lines of, well, since we work with technology and prospection, I would like to understand more of what Petrobras and Embrapa think, especially, and how do you see the use of AI in the processes that you have mentioned? I think Petula mentioned that. And how do you see that? How do you see that? Is this positive, or how do you see that being used in the next few years? AI with Delphi for creating personas and running those models. Do you have anything going in towards that? I would like to hear a bit about that.
Okay, the package. Two more questions. Maria Silveira, Unicap, and Social Director of Unicap. I would like to ask, just a curiosity, Petrobras has a capacity building program for young entrepreneurs. Are you retaking this as a great project to incentivize young entrepreneurs? This was not mentioned. Okay, good. Another question. Maurício Guedes and then Lucas. 3 questions, that would be 4. Okay, I'll stand up for you to know who I am. Maurício Guedes, currently in the Development Secretary of the State, and I have a question for Renata from Petrobras. If I'm not mistaken, when you ended presenting the 3 scenarios, the forecast for oil participation in the energy worldwide matrix changed a lot, from 21% in a scenario, or the opposite, 17% in a small variation. And I would like you to talk a little bit more about this, if I understood correctly. The expectation of Petrobras that apart from the scenario, the participation of oil will not vary a lot. If I'm mistaken, please correct me. Thank you. Tuca, please. For Fernando, some very brief questions. I'm sorry, Antônio Márcio Boinor, Economy Institute of Unicap and NCPF since the beginning. When you show the data about Brazil-China cooperation, I didn't see some information regarding the importance of the comparison. Perhaps this in the future could be commented, some kind of methodology, some kind of mechanism to try to understand, because you can have, for example, where something is always very valid, and that other can be much more important. The second one that for me is more important, I would like you to comment about, let's say, the drive this cooperation, because one thing that we notice here in Brazil, when we talk about cooperation, and we see this in Embraer and many other institutes, the initiatives end up being personal ones, depending on researchers' initiatives, not punctual or not guided by a strategic vision. I would like to know if you've made some kind of thinking about noticing in this set of cooperation if there's something more guided to a plan, or if it's our initiatives that we will go to China. And myself, I wrote a paper with 2 or 3 Chinese, and as a result of a trip to China just by chance. Okay.
Comentário, obviamente a minha apresentação ficou
My presentation is more in terms of cooperation, Brazil-China, just to show the possibility, and also to follow up the presentations. The following presentation was very interesting, but in fact, I don't have anything to add. I thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Renata. You talk about whatever you want. There are 4 questions. Well, I spoke very little about P&G investment. I was trying to find the numbers here, but these are very big numbers. We have a legal duty to invest 1% of technological funds of special participation. So I'm going to look for this exact value for strategic plan for 5 years. They were very high numbers. But we have many initiatives in Simpish of young entrepreneurs or startups. We have contests for startups. We have specific selections for startups because the technology centers we have funds post university participation in labs. UFRJ has many copy, for example. So there are a lot of resources. So if I didn't mention them because we were talking about scenarios, but I do have these numbers. Regarding another question, Brazil, China, I think it was for Fernanda, not for me, but for you to, I'll talk about oil. Petrobras has a lot of partnership with China, not only of Chinese companies that are here with us, but also we have many MOUs with Chinese companies, many in low carbon technology. China today is a leader in hydrogen and in solar and wind. So entering these new technologies, we have a lot of partnerships, not only with state companies of oil and gas, but also companies that are new renewables. Regarding the numbers, I think I spoke very quickly. Those are numbers that are they're not real numbers because we do not disclose our scenario externally. These are only in numbers that are an example of how we quantify. But just for you to have an idea, we forecast 3 scenarios. In one scenario, today the oil demand is about 100 million barrels per day, and this demand is near 100 million barrels per day because it's exactly centered with China, India, Africa, increasing the consumption in the slow transition scenario, and a quick transition scenario, demand of oil is under 40 million barrels per day, so less than the half of what we consume today. So of course, these are the true numbers, yes. So these 40, yes. So in this scenario of 40 million barrels per day, it counts with a very strong change in the standards of consumption because we have some sectors we call hard to abate. You have a lot of difficulty to do this transition. I'll give you an example. Planes, airplanes, air transportation. Air transportation is a sector that's very difficult not to have the liquid fuel because of the energy density that it has. So probably what you will have is a SAF, but of course you won't have the raw material to produce for the whole world to consume SAF in all their flights. So you have some sectors that are very difficult for you to have this transition of oil to other products. Besides that, in Braki, we don't have oil only for transportation. I say that everybody, all the petrochemical, you will have a consumption for petrochemical not emitting CO2. So we have space for oil, even in net zero world, because a net zero world considers not that you're not going to be issuing, but you'll be compensating everything that you emit. You work with CCO as a capture and stocking of carbon. So Petrobras today has the greatest CCOS programs in the world, where you capture the carbon, you re-inject in our reservoirs to increase the production of oil. So it's a company that uses more CCOS steel industry. We signed in the MS. So I'm sorry, because we don't disclose it publicly. I didn't want to put this on a slide, and probably we want to distribute this, and we will exemplify. So with this public, everything is important. We're working a lot in this. Of course, we have different ways of suppliers. We have some equipment that's very different to think it's a startup. There was a question about AI. We work a lot with AI in forecasts, and we work a lot with AI in the reservoirs. We have digital twins in order to. The most expensive part of productive chain of oil is to find the oil. If you would, with AI, to lessen the drills, reproducing what you believe is underground, you are able to apply this in an economical way. And I use this in many ways. With logistics, also we work with AI, and also our panels. You go to a refinery today, it's all digitalized. You have very few operators in the refinery. Thank you very much. Lavinia, please. Talk about artificial intelligence. BNDES also uses for a long time artificial intelligence, but it's an ongoing process to analyze the data and also to have the prospection of clients and to understand there's also a very strong care of BNDES to use technology, as you mentioned, because we understand there's also a problem on not creating new discrimination of credit. So there's a very strong care to discuss this and to reflect how this can be impacted. And we do have a discussion on which is the pillar for the support of AI out of the NGS, because of one side, we have possible many productivity gains. It can also not use labor, and we are a development bank, so we have to be very careful considering jobs also. Not any job, but it's a quality job, a fair job, a decent job, as we say in methodology. So we have this discussion. Recently, we went in November last year. We had a seminar about AI, and we had some important issues that are not mentioned. It's important to mention them. For some people talk this, but not everybody talks this. AI consumes energy in an incredible way, and it uses a lot of water and clean water for the refreshing of the processes. So it's very important to talk about ecological consequences of the use of AI, social consequences of AI use, and also it's possible to see the opportunities. Alessandro Lombardi, there was a speaker that talked about this in our seminar. He said that Brazil has a very clean energy matrix. We can attract and be a great worldwide hub in order to have, for us to supply energy for AI. The data centers would be in Brazil near clean energies, contributing for the whole world, not only for decarbonization of the world, because we have nowadays barriers as advanced in California. You can't expand AI. So strategic issues of this are under debate and now in seminars. If they will become materialized in scenarios or not, I don't know. But if we had this today, the AI would be one of the most important sources because economical and environmental, very many legal and social issues also, and regulation. Besides supplying energy for the data centers, I think also we should supply gray mass. That's the idea. Just in the line of AI, that what Yuri mentioned, Embraer also uses in our scenarios, in our research groups. This is already quite intensified, and the idea now is in the new review of the Center of Intelligence to gain a new space, but the tools are already being used. Thank you, Dr. Mbu.
One about the cooperation, that is the Brazil-China or the Brazil-China or the Japan multilateral cooperation, why it is needed. And the imperative is like this, and most of the future growth will be happening in the emerging economies. This emerging economies has a huge demand, and their economy is growing very fast, and the scale is very high. So this technologies provide, and this cooperation is an opportunity, and most of the people will be becoming rich. They will be consuming more, and if they continue the same lifestyle of big rich powers, and we cannot sustain. And this is where this technological cooperation comes. Whether we can improve our living standards of these emerging economies, still most of the people are poor. They are the low income. Whether they can improve the prosperity, improve the living standard, and with this available technology or the new technologies. That is where most of the cooperation is needed. And the second point is about the artificial intelligence, and this is related to the speed. And if you look into the technological, and we have the radios, and this Macaroni invented the radio, and it took nearly 40 years to become a mainstream medium. But in the case of IT, it took nearly 15 years. But if you take that artificial intelligence, it took nearly 2 years to reach this 90% level. The speed at which this artificial intelligence, and it is a kind of uncharted territory for all the stakeholders. What type of impact it will have, economy-wide and social-wide, we don't know. But there are several studies indicate this artificial technology is based on the data. This data, artificial intelligence, how intelligently we use the big data to predict. And but there is some study says that this exploitation of the data will be over by 2030. To keep this AI momentum goes on, we need more data. And this data may not be available beyond the 2030. So it may be a slowdown of the AI can be predicted after 2030. Thank you.
Bom, muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. I also remind you the explosion of AI happened in the last few years because of the Latin language models, but the origin of AI is from the 60s. So we start a long path, a lot of decades, with something that in AI they call it winters. You have winters of AI. What Dr. Umbu is saying, perhaps we're not having a winter, but maybe autumn in 2030. And we are passing our time. I think it's your time, and thank you very much for the violence cell. I would like to say some things. In first place, that everything started with this idea that we were going to have a seminar with the president of Casted that would tell us about the Foresight work, and it ended that our Foresight work are incredible and are very impacting. So I think that this really allowed for us to have the awareness that what is done in Brazil is of huge importance and is in the precise direction and relevant direction. That is the first comment. Due to this, I would like to leave an idea. I don't know if it's feasible, I don't know if it's going to be implemented, but I'll give you an idea. Is to build, we're always talking about innovation ecosystem. I think we should talk about a future ecosystem, and to create a future ecosystem that obviously in the governance structure would be the coordinator. We would have a coordination, and we would unify the stakeholders that we already here have many of them here and many others that would be part of this ecosystem of the future. Surely our future institute could help in this achievement. And I think this idea that we would call the stakeholders and we could adopt a model of a consortium of Embraer. There is a product consortium, and I think that it's an idea that could mobilize all these institutions and join all the initiatives, because what I noticed is the great problem is the absence of communication among all these different experiences that obviously we have a synergy, a huge synergy. So I think this is the moment to build something like this, because we have all the institutions and all the possible channels, and I talk about net zero. Net zero is a mission that interests all these institutions and that become a mission that is able to articulate this set of institutions. And lastly, I think that in this supposedly, imagining this is possible, I don't know if it's possible, but imagine that this is possible, this ecosystem, future ecosystem would have innovations that are necessary for this, the idea that we have limitations and which are they, how to face them, the constraints, the restrictions, and the social impacts also. So I think it's an interesting idea that we could as I've been mentioned, I noticed that I had lost the first question regarding AI. Just to comment, yesterday by chance I commented that in the conference that we're organizing, we're already using this. We're going to use this regarding the contribution of this. So we are already working in this. But I really enjoyed this a lot regarding the future, because we also consider this, all the studies that I commented about Michel Godet, Ryan Miller, the future leaders, and all the anticipation, the future and Shell group also that I commented. I think it's a good idea, and I also want to see that CGE accepts to participate in this group. Thank you. Kindly I excuse myself.